Hello and welcome everybody to today's session. And I hope you all are doing well. So I welcome you all to the session on Russia and Ukraine crisis that has been organized by Team Red Lantern Analytica. So Team Red Lantern Analytica is an international affairs observer group that is based out of New Delhi, India. It focuses on critical issues that are related to China, with special focus on Sino-India relations, issues of national and international security, energy and environment. The main aim of our organization is to draw in India's foremost academic institutions and security intelligentsia, corporate institutions, monetary establishments, and experts in discussion on India's foreign policy and extend the country's role in global issues. To maximize the institutional and scholarly capacity of strategic thinking in India, we are required to integrate expertise in our research in order to foster an even-minded international strategy for India. This is a young organization that is in constant search for fresh ideas and thought in the strategic studies discourse. With this goal in mind, we have set ourselves as an autonomous and a solitary international strategic think tank. We are an intellectual startup functioning with a small number of individuals who are passionate about international affairs. I would again like to welcome all of you, and this session will be moderated by Arshay Bhardwaj, who is a research scholar in Red Lantern Analytica. I now request Arshay to take over the further session.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome from Red Lantern Analytica to today's session. And we have three important and research scholars with us today. And we have Dr. Swasti Rao, and we have Dr. Rajkumar, and we have Major Amit Bansal with us, and who have been, uh, you know, uh, doing research, and today they stand in a great research institutes. They have written books, and Swasti Rao itself is a multilingual, and she also has a very in-depth research regarding international relations, and has been a defense analyst too, and still is. And we have the other two scholars with us, who I would introduce one by one. So I would like to start with a very basic, with the topic that we have for today, which is Russia and Ukraine conflict, and the focus will be over on China, Ukraine, and Russia mostly. So as for now, what we understand is that there are peace talks going on. Everything took part slowly and steadily, step by step. So right now we see that there is no compromise from either side, and none of the sides are wanting to compromise because of their demands that they have. Russia has its own demand and Ukraine has its own demand. So I would like to go forward, and I would like to ask a few questions, and we'll start with the section with the questions. Just allow me a minute, please. Yes. So I would like to ask Dr. Swasti Rao first. How do you? Because I would like to start with her, because she is into international relations. We'll come back to Major Amit Bansal afterwards, because he will also enlighten us about India's role in it, which is very important. So, Dr. Swasti Rao, how do you believe that the Russian and Ukraine conflict can come to an end? Is there a chance? And if there is, what is the middle ground?
Well, Archie, thank you. I'd like to extend my thanks to Red Lantern Analytica. And, it indeed is a pleasure to be here and talking about something which is of such pressing international and global concern. And you've already, I think you and your colleague, they have already sort of laid the ground for how complex this entire thing has become. So you've asked me one question. The only thing I'd like to ask is, so, I go on talking for about 10-15 minutes, or then do you plan to ask me intermittent questions? What is it going to be
I
like?
would go with the flow. I would like to go with the flow. That makes things easier for all of us to understand. So
Right,
definitely, you have 15 minutes and put it all that you've got, because we really need a very great understanding, and it's an honor.
Right.
So yes.
So what I'm planning to do today is that since I have the privilege of starting first, so I'll have the first mover advantage, and I would probably talk about and touch upon all the things that I consider important and the way they are unfolding. The first has already been highlighted by Akshay, and like you said, that what really is going to be a likely solution, to the Russia-Ukraine crisis. And obviously that is a very, very complex issue in its own regard. And I'll tell you how, because we've been, like, here at IDS, at least we've been trying to really, track it at a deeper level. And so to understand as to what really, we know what is Putin's end game, but then what is West's end game and what is the American end game here? That's one. The other thing that I would definitely want to touch upon is the role of sanctions, and, that this entire factor of how China, has been touted as this, support to Russia in these times, and what really is the reality behind it, and where is it going, and how is it affecting the global geoeconomic architecture. So beginning first as to what you said about what is likely solution, okay, of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Let me first tell you that Russia-Ukraine conflict did not really turn out the way Russia had anticipated. And I'm sure, Major Bansal would perhaps give you a more military understanding of where Russia went wrong and how they kind of overestimated their own military might and kind of underestimated the Ukrainian preparedness, or by proxy, at least the West support, to Ukraine. And that really kind of had them stalled at a few places, and not just going by the Western narrative, because one of the key things that also emerged in this conflict was the role of information and disinformation. Okay, so we saw that the West was really armed very well with a particular kind of a narrative right from the beginning of the special military operation, while the Russian side was, they were completely blacked out, and then only recently that this really start out coming up with their objectives, and their Ministry of Defense started coming out with official, so to say, accounts of what really is happening, and their embassy is also reaching out to a lot of government, so to say, offices now, and clarifying them about the Russian stand. But other than that, we basically saw that there was a complete blackout when it came to Russia, right? We did not really know what were the Russian figures, but the that was coming from West. So obviously there was a kind of an asymmetry when we look at the narrative building, of course. But the second thing that we can say now, because it's already been over a month, with a bit of confidence now, is that obviously the Russian objectives were not really laid out in a strategically, I would say, efficient way. And initially we, there were a couple of aims that Putin said that he wants. One is demilitarization and one is denazification. By demilitarization, he basically wanted to kind of clean out all the military equipments that have been getting pumped in Ukraine after 2014 particularly. And by denazification is a euphemism. I'm going to take more time to explain to you what denazification is, because that is where a lot of keys actually lie. So I'll take time to to explain that. But by and large, at the outset, I can say that by denazification, on the one hand, is a kind of a euphemism that Putin uses for anybody who's pro-Western and anti-Russian. So it's not so much to do with the white supremacy, ideology per se, but it's more to do with, pro and against the Russian interest. Okay, that is what he likes to use it as. And secondly, of course, with denazification, he is aiming at a few neo-Nazi groups who are there in Ukraine and who actually play a much more important role than we perhaps sitting in India can imagine. And now as research is coming and a lot of declassified documents are coming, we are seeing what really has been the CIA doing with these neo-Nazi groups. Okay, so that was another thing. So demilitarization, denazification. And initially we were thinking that perhaps he's going to be dividing Ukraine, in two parts along the river Dnipro, but I don't see it happening now. Then we saw that Putin is demanding constitutional guarantees against Ukraine joining NATO. And Initially, Zelensky said that I don't want to give constitutional guarantees, but then maybe just an oral guarantee should be enough. My assessment right now is that the way this has been going on, and it's like really that fatigue is setting in, okay, at least at the level of Russia, though they have not been saying it, and they have been saying that we are going to double down on the offensive and all that. But I personally feel that a middle ground would be drawn where I think some sort of a written guarantee, even if not a constitutional amendment, perhaps would come, and Ukraine would officially not join the NATO in foreseeable future, which anyway it was not going to join after the problem at Crimea and now at Donetsk and Lugansk. That's one anyway. The second thing that we'll be perhaps see is that Donetsk and Lugansk, the two regions, the two breakaway provinces, in Donbass, would perhaps get some sort of an autonomy, or Putin might just, force Zelensky to give them some sort of an autonomy, right? Even if not full statehood. So, those are the two things that I perhaps see happening there, and that's about it. I don't see anything else happening as far as that is concerned, because Russia has also seen that Zelensky is also in no mood to capitulate. So that's one. Now let me come to the more important thing of what I was saying as far as denazification is concerned. And why I say this is because from here, we kind of understand what really is West planning. Now, if you allow me, to elaborate on it a little bit, you see, ever since this war started, West started pumping Ukraine with tactical defense weapons like the Javelin missiles and the Stinger missiles and some anti-tank weapons too, and of course some drones, etc. So what is the point of the shoulder-held Javelin and Stingers, right? Basically, when a country does not really have a very elaborate air force mechanism, and if you really want to help that country against a mighty oppressor, what you do is that you kind of tactically spread out air defense. And the best way and the most efficient way to do that is by giving the Javelin, because they're shoulder held, okay? So initially, it looked very asymmetric, right? I mean, why is West pumping Ukraine with thousands and thousands of Javelins and Stingers and some anti-weapons? Anti-weapons are more effective, of course, but then you need an equally trained, labor, like the skilled labor, to navigate those. Anyway, so why are they doing it? Wasn't it very obvious that West are really helping or instigating Ukraine to fight a war that they can never really win in a conventional way, right? So this is a large-scale conventional, offensive that Ukraine doesn't look like winning at all. Then the point is why. So what I am here to share with you is that that West always knew this, that they are drawing Ukraine into a war that Ukraine can never win. And right from the beginning, the West's endgame is that they want to foster, they want to propel a long-drawn insurgency, okay, against Russia. And that is also one of the reasons why you see Russia and Putin is not really any more interested in bringing in a puppet regime like Yanukovych, okay, in the puppet regime will not work, because a long-drawn insurgency is going to bleed Russia in the longer run, coupled with the impact of the economic sanctions. Now, the point is that, on the 28th February itself, Zelensky established a new wing of, his armed forces, and he called it the International Legion of Territorial Defense of Ukraine. And basically, lots and thousands of foreign fighters started to, join it. Now, initially, of course, it felt that, my God, he was just riding high on the anti-Russia, this thing. He was really, riding high on that, emotion. But basically, if you look at it closely, most of these foreign fighters are neo-Nazi sympathizers. Okay, so they are a small minority, but they take some significance in case some insurgency against Russia happens. And this is what I'm coming to. So basically, and the problem is that when it comes to foreign fighters, and if you look at the mainstream media, right, I mean, their experiences are not really covered well. So their joining is reported enthusiastically, but their leaving or fleeing is hardly finding any mention. Now, anyway, the point that I want to draw your attention to is that there has been a CIA program aimed at training these fighters for a long-haul insurgency as long as about 8 years now. So there's been an 8-year-old CIA program which has been aimed at cultivating an anti-Russian insurgency, which has been running in eastern Ukraine much before the special military operation began. And, it's been so recent that the CIA operation and the CIA-backed separatists, who were fighting the Russian-backed separatists, they were pulled out only in February. This is just before the special military operation began. So the point that I want to say is that the West is fighting or helping Ukraine fight this war, knowing that a conventional winning is not happening, but a long-run insurgency will come. Now, the problem is that, this is not, this kind of becomes important again, because these are people, these are groups, the neo-Nazi groups, and there are two. One is an Azov battalion, and Azov battalion has now started to make some news in the, in the news, some news in the media these days, but there are more. There's a group called Centuria. There are also other groups, okay? Now the Russians have also started talking about it very clearly. Now the problem with them is that they are very, very unorganized. Now there is an Azov battalion, which is a part of Russian, National Guard. So they are a part of Russian military, but at the same time, they are also having a very fluid, identity, because they are that and more than that, okay? And now all these foreign fighters who are coming and flocking Ukraine, whoever, right, and whatever number it is basically, what I'm trying to say is that it is getting into a state of anarchy. So even after the war will end, and this is what my basic problem is, that even after the war will end, we are not going to see a return of an order anytime soon, because the way all these groups, these asymmetric groups, have been pumped up with weapons, with NATO weapons. And why I say this is because in 2017, a NATO team actually visited Ukraine, and a part of the NATO team actually went to Mariupol. Mariupol is a city is basically the stronghold of these fighters, the Azov battalion in southern, Ukraine, near the Sea of Azov. Okay, so they visited there, and if you go to the website, you will see pictures put up and all that. So not only the US, but UK, Canada, Germany, all these countries have been consistently training the Ukrainian military, as well as the paramilitary forces, as well as these asymmetric forces that I tell you about. And now imagine that all of these people have access to thousands of these, NATO weapons. So even after an official ceasefire happens, and an official, so to say, a peace talk yields some tangible results, okay, even then the ground situation in Ukraine is going to be very, very chaotic, because it is not just, we are not just talking about the Ukrainian army, we are also talking about these very enormous, these kind of groups that really do not know who do they listen to, right? So that is one thing that I really wanted to, take your attention to. And perhaps it is this kind of a wave, right, that was behind, or this kind of a phenomena which was behind Putin's call for denazification. I don't know to what extent is he able to sort of achieve that or not, but then this is one major chaos that is going to kind of set in Ukraine, or perpetrate, once the official ceasefire happens. That's one. The other point was that of the sanctions. I don't know how much time do I have, but I'm just assuming I have about another 5 minutes to go. So, for example, when we are talking about sanctions, like I said, that one of the West plan to sort of bleed Russia in the longer run, one would be by a long-drawn insurgency, and because asymmetric warfare is something where the great powers really suck badly. Great powers have never really won asymmetric warfare, whether it was with Vietnam, in the case of America, whether it was 1979 Afghanistan, Russia, USSR, or whether it was the 2001 or later USA, Afghanistan. You pick up any, right? So great powers really perform very badly when it comes to asymmetric warfare, and this is what basically because the West wants to gift back to Russia a second Afghanistan or a second Syria. Okay, that is what I'm trying to say. So that's one. The second point, like I said, that what is the West plan to bleed Russia in the longer run? Now you look at the role of sanctions. Now very quickly, and I'd love to take questions also on that. Do you know that Russia today is the most sanctioned country in the world? Okay, I have some graphs, and if you want, I can share them with you. But only after 24th February 2022, which is the day of the special military operation, there have been more than about 2,700 more sanctions. So there were already 2,500 sanctions already in place, and then right after that special military operation, 2,000 plus sanctions were imposed on Russia, making it the most sanctioned country in the world. Obviously, not all sanctions are important. Most sanctions are also symbolic. Sanctions are also targeting a lot of individuals. In fact, thousands of over 3,000 individuals have been targeted, and oligarchs have been targeted, because with the idea that perhaps oligarchs are where Putin is really getting that financial support from, and if they divide oligarchs, okay, perhaps Putin's position would be a little bit in jeopardy. So that's the idea behind it. sanctions have not been able to deter Russia, obviously, but sanctions intend to, kind of weaken Russian war machinery in the longer run. And that is why the unprecedented bit has come from cutting off the central bank of Russia from, the SWIFT transactions. But what it has done is that it has basically accelerated, the other global efforts to set up parallel payment system. So whether it is Russia's the system of transfer, it's called the FPSF system or something. It's a parallel payment system, or it's China's CIPS. China also has a system. It's called the cross-border interbank payment system, or the rupee ruble payment system. Basically, it has accelerated those kind of payment systems. That's one. The other thing is that we tend to assume too much on China's support to Russia. Obviously, there will be some support in terms of buying more natural gas, etc. That we saw in 2019, China and Russia had major, so to say, MOUs, with respect to that, deals. And not just that, even this year, 2022, at the time of the Olympics, the Winter Olympics in China, Putin had paid a visit to China, and Xi Jinping and Putin had, another deals with respect to natural gas and oil, etc. So all that happened. But what I'm trying to say is that what really is behind China's, support is the fear of getting secondary sanctioned. Now, secondary sanction means that if there's an entity that has been sanctioned by the West, and if there's another entity that has trade with that particular, with the West, goes on with some sort of a trading or something, with the sanctioned entity, then they are secondary sanctioned, okay? And even recently, even allies such as France and Saudi Arabia, who are like really close allies to America, they have been sanctioned. So China is basically a little wary of being secondary sanctions, and that is why their largest state-controlled banks have limited financing to purchase of new materials or something from Russia. And these two largest state-controlled banks are the ICBC and the Bank of China. So that's one. And China is really very aware of how a French bank and the Saudi Arabian banks, they were kind of sanctioned under the secondary sanction thing. So China is a little wary. China also doesn't want its own global supply chains affected because of Russia, because understand that Russia and China have good trade, that's there, but then it's nothing if you compare what is Chinese trade with the EU or with the US, right? So it's not even a patch upon that. So obviously the Chinese are not really willing to disturb that. And the other thing about this particular equation is that, and I think I've reached my time, but I'll just wrap up, I'll say this and I'll wrap up my presentation now, which is that even when it comes to buying gas, okay, or any or oil, the problem with China is that unlike a good friend, what they usually do is that they take full advantage of such a situation. They exploit the situation to their advantage. And even in 2014, what they do is that they force the Russians to give them bigger discounts, okay? So that kind of puts a pressure on Russia to diversify. And of course, we saw how Russia kind of offered us oil at a discounted price, and we've already kind of built our own strategic reserves because of that. So I think I've already reached my my time limit, so I'll stop here, but I really do look forward to more questions on the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Swasti Rao. We do have questions, but I'll come to that in the end, because now Dr. Swasti Rao has laid down a basic overview and understanding from an analytical point of view. I would like to go to our Major Amit Bansal, who is a veteran who has also joined us before. We had a webinar, I remember, where he spoke about the global implications on Taliban and Afghanistan. And it's an honor to have you again here, sir. Now we all people and all the research associates have an overview of it. I would like to get into the depth, and what you can answer us is something that definitely nobody can, because you have that experience, rich experience that we now require. Now, I would like to ask you, despite being a mighty military power, when we talk about Russia, we see that it has not been effectively it's not effectively overcoming the resistance from Ukraine. And we all know that Ukraine is not that strong, but you have more idea to it. Now, does this prove that the big states and howsoever powerful, they find it hard to win wars with the smaller powers, military wise or otherwise? And I would also like to, when you will provide us with the answer, I would also like to point out we can go back to the U.S. Vietnam conflict that took place. That was during the failure of Operation Rolling Thunder. And we would also, I would request you to put a little bit of inputs in that too. Even at that time, US failed a little bit. So, what is your say and the understanding that you would like to bring to us forefront?
Thank you, Ashay. As you are asking about the scope of battle which is going on in Ukraine, so it is little different when we compare it with Afghanistan, when we compare it with the American attacks in Serbia and all these places, Iraq and all. It is totally different. So Russia is not bombing cities the way America did it in Vietnam or Afghanistan. It is not just carrying out carpet bombing in cities and wiping them off. Russia is moving slowly. And when you move slow, avoiding collateral damages, and in such a terrain where the fighting is happening in built-up area, fighting in a built-up area is very, very big challenging task. So a few days back, I was having a word with one of the Russian military officers. He said, "We do not know who's the enemy. People are hiding in the buildings. People are hiding in the apartments with the anti-tank launcher. People are hiding in the basements of the building with machine guns, with weapons. So these are purely civilians who have been given weapons by the Zelensky regime." So he told me that in what category should we keep these people? Are they civilians or the fighters? So that is a challenge. Second challenge is that as Swasti has brought out the neo-Nazism in Ukraine, which has started in 2014 onwards. I would like to pay a little bit attention on that. So in 2014, when this Ukrainian revolution started, everybody knows that what is the importance of Ukraine. It's supposed to be considered as a food bowl for Europe, and it has got a very peculiar importance in the Eurasian belt. Anybody who's present in Europe, in Ukraine, is if Russia is present in Ukraine, it is almost controlling the entire European Union. And if America is present in Ukraine, they are knocking right at the door of Moscow. So anybody would like to have control over the Ukraine. So that's the military importance and strategic importance. With that, CIA has been trying a lot to put its stronghold in Ukraine for quite long. And finally, they orchestrated, we got input that they orchestrated this 2014 Ukrainian revolution, after which Russia came and annexed Crimea, and things started. One more incident has played a very, very vital role in that, which is not there in the media. And I must say that we must pay attention at that particular small reason also. And that is the separation of Ukrainian church from the Russian church. See, Ukraine and Russia, both the countries are predominantly Christian. And the church has played a vital role ever since the First World War and Second World War in setting up these areas in regimes. So in 2018, when then Russian Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko, he separated the Ukrainian church from Russian church and connected it to the Turkish Orthodox Church. So that also played a vital role. And of course, the way neo-Nazis have been given kind of tutelage and training by the CIA and maybe European military officers, so things have reached to the state. Things started becoming worse when in 2017, Ukraine started signing agreement with the European Union. And in current scenario, when the President Zelensky has reiterated his song of joining NATO, so that is, of course, Russia, what Russia did in, for the sake of its own security. But again, the question comes to us, how? What is going to happen now? So we have to understand how Russia is moving in and what kind of objectives Russia is following. So Russia understands well that in 1989 also we had that Treaty of Conventional Armed Forces in Europe and all those kind of treaties which were formed after the Cold War, and as per which the NATO was supposed to come to an end, but NATO did not end. It expanded exponentially. So Russia wants to be sure that even whatsoever happens here, Ukraine will not be in a position to join NATO in the future, and even if it joins NATO, so there is a buffer in between Ukraine and Russia. So what it wants to do, it wants to first, already it is occupying Crimea. It wants to create a land belt from Crimea to Donbas region, where it is already declared the People's Republic of Donetsk and Luhansk. So it wants to create a land strip to that area, and Mariupol is one of the most important part of that. It also wants to deny all the industries, all the revenue to Ukraine. So if you see the pattern of Russian attacks, all the missile attacks, they are attacking the prime export hubs of Ukraine. Whether it is Kharkiv tank factory, whether it is Kharkiv tractor factory, whether it is, you can say, the Antonov airfield, Antonov factory in the north of Kiev. You can see the Mykolaiv, the Zoria Mass-Product factory, which is producing, which is on the top 5 gas turbine factories of the world. Whether it is Mariupol Ship Design Bureau, so they are destroying these industries one by one, so that Ukraine is not in a position to economically develop itself. Similarly, the Donbas region and Luhansk region are the regions which are the biggest producer of grains. So they are the food balls. So it is also capturing them. So it is moving with an objective. And to capture the Kyiv is also one of the major objectives, which Russia feels that it can use it as a barter on the table. Now comes to the situation, what is going to happen now? Russia is facing challenges because of the fighting going on in the built-up area, and it is a major challenge. But in any case, Russia wants to occupy Kyiv and then force Ukraine for a surrender, or maybe any kind of an amicable solution where Ukraine agrees that firstly it will not join NATO, and secondly it will reduce its military power, and thirdly it will recognize Crimea and the Donbas region, which has been declared as an independent republic. So Russia will achieve two objectives. One is Crimea is recognized that it's part of Russia, so that its entire Black Sea fleet is secure. Secondly, the Donbas region is declared as an independent country, so that there is a buffer between Ukraine and Russia, so that even in the future, if NATO does something, there is a buffer between the two countries. And thirdly, it will economically, financially suppress Ukraine, so that it is not able to recover in the future. So these are primarily, I can say, the Russian objectives are. One of the drawbacks which we are seeing now is I wrote about it also, is a big challenge, and that is the refugee problem. If we see the area of Ukraine, and if we see the area west of Dnipro River, I have inputs that almost 40% people from this area west of Dnipro River have already fled the country or are located at the border. So you can imagine the state of a country where 40% manpower is already left to the other countries, and the kind of pressure it is going to create on the European countries where they're going. The toll are also big. We have some estimates, because what we are hearing it clearly from the Western media, the entire Russian media has completely been blank, and whatever Russia's statement is making, because they're not coming on social media, they're not supposed to. All their YouTube channels have been blocked, all their web telecasts have been blocked. Despite of that, whatever inputs we are getting is that whatever figures are being escalated by the Ukrainian media or Western media are highly escalated. That's not exactly the figure. And if we see the total figures, we have till yesterday, I was having some my independent analysis. So we have about 22,000 people who have lost their lives from both the parties, from maybe Russian and Ukrainian side, lost their lives in Ukraine alone, and out of which almost 6,000 to 7,000 have died only in Mariupol, where the maximum damage has been caused. Mariupol and Kharkiv and Sumy, these three places have suffered the worst. As we know, cities are turning into the ghost towns, and the third drawback is now going to be the supplies. While Western forces are pumping in their weapons and warlike stores into Ukraine, nobody is bothered about the humanitarian supplies. Nobody is bothered about the food. Nobody is bothered about the medicines. As per our estimate, Ukraine is left with about 10 to 12 days of food. Some cities have even run out of food totally. That is a big challenge going to be, and things are, if they're not resolved in the next say a week or so, it is going to create a massive humanitarian disaster in Ukraine. Now, I'll quickly try to, because I think I've got about 3-4 minutes left. So I would quickly like to wind up by saying, if somebody asked me a few days back that who is going to be the net loser in this Russian-Ukraine conflict, some people say Russia because they've been put under sanction. Somebody told me that it could be Ukraine because Ukraine has completely been devastated. But actually, the biggest sufferer from this entire fiasco would be the European Union. I'll tell you why. Firstly, almost 75% of Russian gas goes to European Union, and since because of cold weather, they rely on Russian gas to keep themselves warm, especially the Northern Europe countries. If they don't buy from Europe, they are doomed. And if they buy from outside, as after the sanctions, if they start buying from Qatar or other countries, the gas will be so expensive that it will burn holes into their economy. Post-COVID scenario, if we see European Union is suffering a lot because of in last 2 years their economy has crashed. Most of the countries are on the verge of an economic collapse. You have seen the example of Greece, Estonia, and some other countries. They are suffering the worst. And with this scenario, where first of all Russian gas is not reaching them, and secondly, they are not a lot of exports are also going to Russia. That is also not going. And because of this fiasco, they are not also not able to trade with other countries. So, net to net, the biggest burden will fall on European Union. And at the same time, as I brought out about the EU refugee crisis, these countries like Estonia, Slovakia, Poland, Romania, Hungary, so they have got entire of the chunk of refugees are falling onto them. So they have to manage the refugees also, along with to fight this economic crisis. Things are quite severe, and we have to wait and watch now how things unfold, how things move. All the things are still fluid. We still don't know how many days it will take for Russia to capture Kyiv. But I personally feel that they should announce a ceasefire after they capture Kyiv, because that's one of the major objectives they want to achieve, and that can initiate. Today also the talks are happening in Istanbul. So one of the member of parliament from Ukraine and one of the key advisors to President Putin are already there. They're talking on various issues. So we have to see how things unfold, and we have to see how things are in the future only. But the next 1 week is quite critical now. Thank you.
Thank you, Major Amit Bansal. You have shed a light on all the recent developments that have been taking place in the recent 2 to 3 days, and definitely we all have been following up. Educational institutes are being attacked, and I also agree with you and Dr. Swasti when it comes to everything has been going very slow. When Russia started its attacking, it was basically the military, and slowly and steadily the invasion started. And I totally agree that it was very unexpected thing that has taken, because of course nobody was expecting this to suddenly come onto the people of Ukraine. Yes, please.
Actually, just like to add one more thing. See, since you added the question of attacking the education institutions and civilian targets, recently we saw a video which was released by the Russian media where a mall was targeted, but mall was targeted primarily because it was hosting the military equipment of Ukraine. I also had two videos. One of the videos had a school building in Mariupol where children are studying in half of the building, and half of the building has been fortified, and Ukrainian military soldiers are staying over there. The second video which I got was from Kharkiv. In Kharkiv, there was a big medical college, and that big medical college hostel where where the students are staying, that half portion of that medical college hostel has been converted into a base for the Ukrainian army. Now, this kind of actions by the Ukrainian army, I can directly call them as taking a human shield, and nobody is bothered about it. But what is happening? We are just taking an approach on the Western media. Western media says, okay, they have attacked the school. We are just blindly following that they have attacked the school, but we don't bother to see whether the school was actually a school or whether the school has become a military headquarters for the Ukrainian forces. This is a very critical thing, because whatever news we are getting from all across Ukraine, we have got hundreds of examples where Ukrainian forces are using the townships, they are using the colonies, they are using the colleges, they are using the educational institutions, they are using even the hospitals to be their headquarters and to hide their military hardware. We must remember that. Thank you. Sorry for interrupting.
So there is one more question. Then I would like to move on to Dr. Raj Kumar, and I would like you to just give us a little bit of insight on the short and long term implications of this conflict for India.
See, India has got a lot to plan now, because we have been a partner with Ukraine, and we have been a partner with Russia also. As far as Ukraine is concerned, we have been buying the gas turbines from them. Although we have about 4 gas turbines in reserve, so immediately there is no issue. But next 7 to 8 months, we need to have an alternative of these turbines. Russia is not making it much, so we may have to go to Rolls-Royce, maybe we go to GE, we may have to go to some other manufacturer for that. These are critical for us, because the way Indian Navy is expanding fast, we are rolling out the destroyers and frigates every 6 months. We need more gas turbines. Secondly is the spares for our aircrafts, primarily N-32s. So N-32, all the spares were primarily coming from Ukraine. Now the factory has been completely finished. So it is a question as to from where are we going to get the spares, because Russia has already phased out much of the N-32 fleets, and they don't manufacture much of the spares. Third part is the parts of the tanks. So armored parts, a large amount of them used to come from Kharkiv, the tank factory. Again, there is a question from where they're going to come. So it is a question for us, it's a big challenge for us. So basically, these 3 things matter a lot. And other than that, of course, some helicopter parts. Basically, you can say in a nutshell, we were buying the tank parts from them, we were buying the aircraft parts from them, and we were buying our gas turbine engines from them. And we need to find an alternative as fast as possible. We need to find a reliable alternative. We need to find a very concrete alternative for this. Other than that, military hardware, I don't think so that war in Ukraine might be able to affect anything. One last point that we were buying a lot of hardware from Russia. So a lot of people have raised questions that how India is going to pay now to Russia, because Russia has been put under a lot of sanctions. So let me tell you, because India has been buying these hardware from Russia for a long time. Almost 6-7 decades we have been buying. And over this period of time, we have established a lot of parallel banking systems. We also operate a Indo-Russian joint venture bank. So technically speaking, payment of military hardware to Russia should not be a problem for India. Thank you.
Thank you, Major, so much. Thank you so very much. You have enlightened us, and I also see that there has been a connect between what Dr. Swasti explained, and you have enhanced the information and given your opinion. And I would like to move on to Dr. Raj Kumar Sharma now, who I'd say that he has worked with as an assistant professor with Rashtriya Raksha University. And this was India's first university on internal security. Now, I would welcome you, Dr. Rajkumar Sharma, and I would also put up a very, it's a very dicey question a little bit for everybody, because the common citizens and a lot of people like us and research associates cannot really think towards that. But the question now I would like to ask you is Indian stance to assume a neutral mode is it justified in terms of its geopolitical and security concerns? Because it has also been criticized on the similar lines, but a lot of we see that the countries have also, Russia itself has definitely applauded that India has taken a neutral stand. So what I would like your insight over this first.
Okay, I hope I'm audible. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, and I was about to take this, right in the end of what I was planning to speak. But since you have asked me in the beginning, see, India's stand on this question is basically, nations always respond to their national interest, right? So principles always are the secondary thing, right? So realists would say that it is your primary national interest. If India's interest, why did we respond the way we did, right? India was more or less neutral. Now, in that context, I feel there are reasons to this, right? So the first thing is, we have a two-front dilemma for us facing right from on one we have China, on the second and we have the Pakistan, right? Now, if you recall, when Putin launched this war, Imran Khan was in Moscow. Right? And what I'm saying here is that, we had to avoid this Russia, China, Pakistan, some sort of axis coming into the picture, right? Had India said something against Russia, I think that movement would have been a lot easier for the Russians, because there is a Russian that Russia and Pakistan, since almost 10 years now, maybe more than 10 years, right? So that was our first priority. China itself did not say anything, by the way, right? So if China doesn't say anything at a time when China is sitting on India's borders, I think it becomes another more additional burden on India not to say anything, right? And by the way, if you see India's reaction to when the Americans invaded Iraq, India never said anything. We did not condemn the Americans, by the way. So this word condemnation is too heavy for Indian foreign policy. We have never used it for against anybody, whether it is the Americans or the Russians. So that is one thing. The second point here is, if you see in South Asia, historical memory is very, very important. And if you compare the historical memory in South Asia and in Russia's neighborhood, there is a similarity. Because Russia used to be an empire, right? Before 1991, it was a big 16 republics coming together and making an empire. The same feeling was there in India before, till 1947, we were a British empire. So our historical memory has shaped in a similar way. Our peripheries have been very, very unstable. And that has also been the case with the Russians, right? So during the Cold War, if you see, Pakistan became an American ally. They were part of SEATO and CENTO, right? Now, if you see the Russians, they are saying the same thing, that if Ukraine becomes a member of NATO, then it has a direct security implication for them. So I think in India, we can understand what they are going through. We don't only sympathize with them, we empathize with them. Right, so that is the historical memory part. And of course, we all know that Russia has been there with India. They have used their veto 3 times on the question of J&K. They were there with India on the question of Goa. So that is all history, right? Russia is the only P5 member in the history of independent India, which is remembered with a sense of nostalgia, with a sense of love. Right. These days, you can say even France comes into that picture, but you can't compare what the Russians have done for India. Right. So that is the second factor, the historical memory. The third one is, of course, our own assets, our citizens, our students were there. Almost 20,000 students were there caught in the crossfire. So India's immediate priority was not to condemn anybody, because we require support from both of them, whether it is Ukrainian forces or the Russians. So our main priority were our own citizens, our students, and to get them out. We were not in a position to condemn anybody, right? So that was a more practical position. And of course, the last one, the dependence on Russia for weapons, 85%. There is a report in Stimson Center which says it is 85. Media reports generally say 50 to 60%, but I believe it is way more than that. We depend on Russia for our, military equipment. 85% is a big amount. And another point, let me also tell you, I've been writing about this also. American reliability continues to be a factor in India's relationship with Russia. I'll give you 2 examples. One is this, America's almost sudden withdrawal from Afghanistan, right? And there was a statement given by Mr. Jayankar. He said that we were kept in the dark because we don't know what was discussed between America and Taliban during the very last days of the agreement. So he was surprised, speaking publicly. So that is one thing. The second thing is AUKUS, right? They dumped Quad and they went for AUKUS, right? If you see from an Indian position, India would be more than happy because we never wanted Quad to become an alliance, right? But the point is, Americans did spring a surprise on India. Right. So they went for AUKUS. So, reliability continues to be a factor with India's relationship with US. I don't think that has ever been the case with the Russians. Of course, there have been delays of spare parts and everything, but that was the case. And of course, you see India's policy on such issues. Our policy is consistent, right? We never condemned anybody. And by the way, another point is India will never recognize these, breakaway regions of Donetsk and Luhansk. Because if you see, there have been similar examples in the past. For example, Americans recognizing Kosovo. Or another point was two things, with the Russians in South Ossetia and Abkhazia. We cannot recognize them, right? So that is not going to happen because we cannot recognize from our own Kashmir policy, right? We do not recognize self-determination based on a regional aspirations. That we will not do. So what I'm trying to tell you, there are basically differences with Russia. It is not that there are no differences at all. Our position has evolved. We said our first statement was legitimate interests of a country. That means Russia, right? But today our position is that they should respect territorial sovereignty and integrity. Beyond this, I don't think we are going to do America's bidding or anybody's. We have our own independent policy. Our national interest will decide. So that is how it has been. It is neutral, and I think that is the best that India could do in these positions. I mean, in the geopolitical position that we are in, that is the best we could do.
Okay, thank you so much. Following that up, I would also like you to, because the question is related, since we have been talking about China and the geopolitical outlook and an understanding. I would like to ask you, what type of new geopolitical order do you see emerging post the conflict time? We know that it might go long, but still post the conflict time, and following that, do you think that China will still hold fast to its proclamation of limitless strategic partnership with Russia?
Okay. See, this relationship between Russia and China has been played to a big extent, but I still think it is still at the political level. Right? The real cooperation still remains in a position which is not too deep or something like that. In the past, there have been 3 alliances between Russia and China. Because see, big countries who share a big border between them also have big egos, right? So my point is very simple. This is a relationship that is not there going to stay forever, right? It is a tactical thing. Putin is being pushed, right? And I remember a conversation with one of the professors of Russia who was visiting India in 2015. This pivot to Asia has been there since 1990. Putin came to power, right? And he came to power, he changed Russian policy from Atlanticism to Eurasia. That means he was going to take deeper steps with India and China. So that is there is 2 decades. So that told me that what we are doing is in our is not accepting us. Our only position, our only logical thinking is that we need to pivot towards Asia, right? So regarding the second thing, you asked me that what is going to be the global order or something, I think these are the times of global disorder. I don't think there is an order in place anyway, right? We were talking about multipolarity, but our biggest worry now is that we want a Russia which is an independent pole in this, global order. We do not want Russia to be dependent on China. And this, to a big extent, explains India's current position, diplomatic position on the issue of Ukraine, right? So basically, I think this is what we would like to avoid. And if it happens, and this statements by the Americans and others, they have said that, India's relationship with Russia the nature is as such that we understand, but we don't agree with this, right? So India may be somewhere in a position where we might be talking to Russia, and we might, maybe something of that sort. We would, we could, potentially see this, but I don't think there's an order that is going to emerge, right? But yes, I do agree with most of the, commentators that China is likely to emerge a little stronger than what it is today, because Russia might be dependent on that.
All right. So with this understanding, I would also have I have one more question. I'll get back to India a little bit, and there has been a lot of questioning around Quad. So how will Indian stance on the conflict impact Quad clout, if it will?
See, I see my personal assessment of Quad is that India never wanted Quad to be a military alliance, right? So because India was, for us, Russia remained important. And if you see India's Indo-Pacific policy, if you recall, what Mr. Modi has been saying about Russia, we always believe that Russia is a Pacific power. Mr. Jaishankar, while his visits to Moscow, and Mr. Modi has also, been saying this, that since you are a Pacific power, you should be exercising that independent foreign policy. You should not be a subset of Chinese policies in Indo-Pacific, right? So I think Quad will be a position where India, I think we have been facing this problem since Quad came into the picture. Right from the day when we have been telling that we will not abandon Russia. So there may be certain pressures. Of course, Americans will try to do their own thing with India, but yes, other middle powers which are there, Australia and Japan, they have been more consistent with India's policy because they themselves, being middle powers, are more understanding of about diplomatic staying, right? So we will keep continuing to face these pressures, right? And another point is, of course, if you see Quad, in Quad, India is the only country which shares a direct border with China, right? So that makes it very, very easy to defend for India that our pace of Quad relations will go as per India's national interest, right? It is not that you will tell us and we will blindly do that. No, we are the ones who are facing this problem eye to eye, so we will decide the pace of this relationship.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rajkumar Sharma. I'll get back to you with questions. We might have one or two. And right now, I would like to go back to Swasti Rao because she has raised her hand. Also because we have a participant here who has asked a question. So over to you. Now you can definitely put an insight. Yes.
Yeah, so it's been a very, I would say, riveting discussion, and I've been listening to what Major Ben Bansal said in his, I would say, very technically correct analysis of what has been happening there, and also Rajkumar Sharma, and of course, we know each other from JNU, so it's great to see here today, Raj. And I think you also put up a very, I would say, a very lucid understanding, okay, of all that. Just a couple of things I'd like to mention. One with respect to Quad. Because it's something, like where he left. So I would probably pick up the baton from where he left. See, with respect to Quad, I totally agree. One of the things that I find problematic in Quad is that, the Americans would like us to believe as to Quad is really our best bet when it comes to securing our national interest, which is not so, right? If you really look at how Quad has evolved, of course it came up at the right time, and it kind of got that entire cooperation was getting accelerated in the background of the pandemic, etc. All that was happening. But look at a couple of things. Each of those Quad members, whether it's America, whether it's Australia or Japan, they have security treaties with the US. India doesn't have that. B, Raj already mentioned that India is the only country that shares a border dispute with China, and no other country does that except for Japan. They have a island dispute in Senkaku, but they don't really share a territorial, so to say, dispute, a boundary dispute. See, having said that, the Quad members have, on the one hand, said that they understand India's position. They understand it better now. In fact, Australia, we recently had a very important summit with Australia a few days ago, and when they came forward and said that, so far so good. But the thing is that we should also take into account that the Quad members, one of the key areas where the Quad countries need to come together is intelligence sharing. And why I say that is because, see, Quad is not going to be a military alliance thanks to India. India is very, very wary of looking at Quad in terms of a NATO 2.0. So we need to, and obviously we don't want to only talk about vaccine diplomacy and here and there. So for anything else to take care of, and there are two things here that are important. One is called situational space awareness, and which happens in outer space, and one is the maritime domain awareness, which happens in all the maritime security architecture. So for both these things to take off, you need a high level intelligence sharing. So when it comes to India, even though they understand all this, but understand that these two countries are going to be wary of sharing high level intelligence with India, given our closeness with Russians. So this is just a kind of a caveat, okay, which I'm saying that we should not be putting our eggs in the Quad basket, right? If it takes off, well and good. And we need to approach Quad with an understanding that basically it is the Americans who need us more in the Indo-Pacific than we need them, right? It's like it's not the other way around. And the other thing that I want to say is that you look at Australia or Japan, our cooperation with these like-minded countries, like-minded, quote unquote countries, it should develop outside of the Quad framework too. I'll give you the case of example of Japan. You see, despite having such great equation with Japan, look at our bilateral trade. Our bilateral trade is still stuck at about 17 point some billion dollars, right? I mean, which is like, why? We have everything going. We have all these two leaders coming and, giving these wonderful statements, but the bilateral trade hasn't grown. Look at China. India-China bilateral trade has already crossed 125 billion mark, right? Which is in the background of all the LAC disturbance and the pandemic. So what I'm saying is that with countries like Australia, of course, we saw some great, initiatives recently. Also with Japan, the point that I want to make is that India should not put all its eggs in the Quad basket. It is not really the best foreign policy bet that we have to come to China, for sure. The other thing is that we need to be understanding that our intelligence sharing is going to take some time, to evolve, and it is not going to happen as much as, we would like it to happen. And third, that we should try to develop our cooperation with these, with these countries outside the framework of Quad. And, the trade figures I told you was only one of them. That's one. The other thing about, Major Bansal was talking about European Union being the biggest loser. And I think that was a very, very important. We did not get time to get into what really is happening in Europe with respect to the Ukraine, Russia things. One thing is that the US and Japan and I think Canada, whatever, some countries, UK, they put up sanctions against Russia for their fossil fuel. Okay. But European Union has not been able to do that. In fact, one of the reasons why Putin is so confident and so set and not willing to back off is because Putin knows that the trade, that the natural gas dependence, and it is not 75%, and that's an exaggerated figure. I'll give you the exact figures. For the natural gas, it is about 40-46% that Europe is dependent, EU is dependent on Russia. For coal, about, I think, 27%, and oil the same, about 40% or so. So, but by and large, it is still like a 50% is a lot of dependence. And even till date, every single day as we talk, the EU and Russia fossil fuel trade is to the tune of about $755 million every single day. In fact, we saw that, I think 2 days ago, Putin actually kind of, upped the ante and said that now we are not going to be taking the payments in euros and you have to be paying in rubles, which we saw Macron and Olaf Scholz say that we can't do it because, we always, the logistics and the plan was always to pay in euros. But what I'm trying to say is that is a major thing that Putin holds. And Putin knows that if these guys don't listen to him, he'll cut off, like Major Bansal said, and Europe is so dependent on them that they can't really, they can't really diversify overnight. But what is the major thing which is happening in Europe is that realization of their overdependence, and with that overdependence, their vulnerability that comes along with it, has really been realized at a level which was not there before. They are trying to do lots of things. One of the examples we already mentioned about buying oil from Qatar. Obviously, that is not going to be as cheap. But the second thing is that they can also start looking at Central Asia, particularly the Caspian Sea, Turkmenistan, because actually, if you look at Turkmenistan, they are also wary of how they are dependent on China, and they would also like to sort of, diversify. That's true. And third, that, only yesterday, America inked a deal with EU, about, giving them natural gas. Obviously, there are so many things that need to be taken into account as to how really that will happen. But all I'm saying is that this particular realization, which is setting in Europe, was never there. And, it's because of this crisis that it kind of got triggered the way it did trigger. And lastly, the point with respect to Europe is also, because of the, he has already mentioned the destabilized East European belt. Okay, so we will see a lot of destabilization there. And I'm sorry, I'm taking too much time, but this is my last point. So we are going to be seeing destabilization in Ukraine because of all the paramilitary groups out there, which will get all the weapons from NATO. Okay, that's one. The other thing is that we are going to be seeing a lot of disturbance in the Balkans. Okay, why? Because in the Balkans has always been very, very disturbed. But in the Balkans, you see a country like Kosovo, which is not really even recognized by most of the countries in the world. But Kosovo has said that we are very scared of Russia, and they've been asking US to come and set up a military base there. Okay, they want to join NATO very badly. But on the contrary, there's a neighbor, Serbia, which is a bigger neighbor, which said that they are going to be backing Russia. So Balkans, the problem is that half the Balkans is with NATO, half the Balkans is not with NATO. And now Russia is going to really ramp up a lot of activity out there to not let them join NATO in any time in future. Similarly, we are going to be seeing a lot of disturbances in the Caucasus, especially Upper Caucasus, the Armenia, Azerbaijan, that region, because, Russia has been stepping up their military presence out there as well. And thirdly, we are going to be seeing a much more weaponized and much more, I would say, weaponized Europe, because, we will see all these erstwhile neutral countries like Sweden and Finland, where public opinion has been swinging in favor of joining NATO. I don't think they're going to be joining NATO, but the sheer fact that they, for the first ever time, their public opinion started to swing in favor of joining NATO. So that really looks like a very weaponized Europe in that sense. And I think Europe is realizing that their dependence on transatlantic security ties and NATO being the major security provider, despite the optics and despite all the other, joint statements, etc., is in for a real, I would say, overhaul. And, we will see that these countries, by way of either strategic compass or, EU, they will know that they have to fend for themselves. So those were the points I wanted to make.
Okay. Before I move to Mr. Amit Bansal, I request Dr. Swasti quickly tell us and answer us what Ambala ji had asked. There is a question that says that what is the likely future of Vladimir Putin analyzing the international and internal image which is being building up. Also, you have highlighted, and I noted that, and I'm sure everybody has noted that he is aware of what he's doing, because definitely, as Amit Bansal, Major Amit Bansal ji has, told us that Russia is going step by step, slowly, and it knows what it's doing. I would like you to just add on quickly, so I can move back to Amit Bansal ji.
Okay, so let's understand that Putin is not really doing it for anyone else, right? He is like, I think, Dr. Sharma, like Raj has also pointed out very well, that it all comes from that Novorossiya, that larger Russia, understanding, right? That there was this large empire and that dignity and that influence that Russia enjoyed at a particular time. So I think, as far as Putin is concerned, right, he knew that no matter what he does, he's never going to be really liked by the West or something. So he's not really bothered. Let us know that very, very clearly. He's not bothered about what the West thinks of him, in any way. Well, yes, having said that, if you look at the statistics about his approval ratings within Russia, you will notice that ever since, I would say, 90s, right, ever since he tried to sort of double down on the separatism in Grozny, okay, against the Chechen rebels, ever since those times, and especially after 2002, after he came to power, his approval ratings have been pretty consistent in terms of whenever he tries, or whenever there is a dip in his approval ratings, he goes about this attack on neighboring countries in the name of the Russian Empire and that mindset. So we saw that happening in 2008 in Georgia. Like, I think Major Bansal had mentioned, that there are two regions, Abkhazia and Ossetia, where there were Russian, basically ethnic Russians, and Putin intervened and made them into separate states. So we saw his approval ratings like really shoot up. Then at the time of Crimea, his approval ratings really shot up. Okay, and again similarly now. But the problem is, I'll just tell you a little problem out there. So approvals rating, shoot up whenever he kind of whips up this nationalistic frenzy. Okay, and this is something which is very similar in the case of Xi Jinping too. But the problem in Russia is that when you see the impact of sanctions setting in, so in 2014, obviously there were sanctions. They were not very successful, and the data shows that they hardly did what they set out to do. I mean, there was about 7% decrease in Russia's export at the most. But having said that, when that impact of sanctions is being felt, then you see the approval ratings dip. So similarly, even now that the Central Bank of Russia and has been hit, and like a lot of things. I mean, we didn't get into the details of it, but like there've been 4,500 sanctions, and some of them are really tough. So when the common Russian people start to feel the heat of the sanctions, the approval ratings dip. And that is a cause of concern for Putin, not the Western audiences at all. His audiences is the people in Russia and around him, where he wants to be remembered as this really tough Russian leader who could do the unthinkable. And one of the reasons why he's doing it at the age of 69 is because perhaps he thinks that no one else after him would be able to pull this off. Okay, and this is the right time that American role as a global security provider is kind of deteriorating, and no one else can do it perhaps but him. So that is my take on that.
So I hope that Ambala has got the answer. And now I would move on to Major Amit Bansal ji. Sorry that we made you wait a little bit, but now I want you to elaborate and tell us about what you have to say. I am not sure. I cannot hear you. You did not unmute yourself.
My apologies. So I raised my hand when we were discussing about Quad. So we have to remember three things about Quad. And if we remember it, I think that's how it is going to reflect India's foreign policy. Firstly, Quad is not a military alliance. It is not a military alliance, we should remember. Secondly is, we have territorial disputes with China. We have trade disputes with China. We have other kind of disputes with China, but these are disputes between India and China, and we cannot let any other country benefit of it. And thirdly, there have been a lot of activities happening in South China Sea. There have been a lot of activities, a lot of statements from America. So we cannot let America use India as a tool against China, because America has been known to do this. They have been using a country and using it against another country, and ultimately what causes is the devastation of another country. So with that, we should remember it. Second thing is that when we were discussing about the Russian priorities, so in military language, we have we use few terms. We use term the area of control, we use area of influence, and we use area of interest. Area of control which you are controlling, area of influence where you can influence, and area of interest where do you want to pay your emphasis in the future. So for Putin, area of control is his own Russia and CIS countries. Area of influence is going to be Ukraine, where he is going to exercise, he wants to exercise its influence over the Ukraine somehow. And area of interest is going to be European Union. Putin wants its control over European Union so that it can have a established and robust kind of Russian economy in the future. Thank you. That's all. If anybody has got a question, so I can answer that.
Yes, I do have a question for you, Major Amit Bansalji. I'm going to ask you in a second. Give me a moment. Yes. So my question is, since you have also talked about Russia's influence, my question is that how much impact will this conflict have on Russia's financial, political, geopolitical? I want you to touch all the three because I know that you can give us really great insights on it. In a when we talk about the military side of it. So, what impact will this conflict have on Russia in financial, political, and geopolitical terms? And will Russia be able to navigate them and continue to stand as an influential power?
So firstly, I'll cover the political part. So Putin is very strong in Russia. He's got good ratings, and so far he's been able to establish a kind of Russian nationalistic image of himself in Russia. So I do not think so that he's going to go away in any in near future. Maybe in the next 4 to 5 years, he's not going anywhere. So there will be absolute political stability in Russia. Second, I would take because I'll take economic aspect, financial aspect in the last. Second is the geopolitical situation. So Russia has got its allies, and Russia has been known to maintain its close relationship with its allies throughout the time. Like America, it has never ditched its allies. So the countries are there with him. The countries are going to support him, and of course, it will have an impact on its foreign relations. Some countries are definitely going, because there are smaller countries who may come into the influence of America. They may go to NATO, or they may go to like Ukraine has fallen. So these kind of things will happen. We can't predict about them as of now, but yes, major countries will definitely be with him. Now comes to the economic things. Russia has been preparing for such kind of sanctions and economic disasters since 2014. We saw the kind of sanctions were put on Russia after it annexed Crimea. Thereafter, when it even prior to that, when it started the war in Georgia, a lot of sanctions were put. So Putin is used to it. And when we analyze the Russian economy in detail, we see it as a net surplus economy. It is not dependent upon imports. It generates exports. Russia has got a quite large bullion reserve. It has got a good amount of foreign reserve, and it is able to sustain itself with its own resources. So even if you put all kind of sanctions on Russia, even if you put don't allow any country to export goods to him, the only thing Russia imports is machinery, and that it can manage with the help of China and some other countries, the majority of it. So I do not think so. Of course, there will be a temporary impact on Russian economy. We can see that next 2 years are going to be difficult for Russian economy, but certainly it will not collapse. And Putin has the alternatives. It will shake. The economy will shake definitely. It will have some drawbacks, but yes, it has got the capability to get over it, and I'm sure it will be able to get over it.
Thank you so much, Major Amit Bansal. I also would like to ask, is there anything else out of whatever I've asked you? Anything else that we might not be aware of or fully aware of that you would like to give us insight of and understanding? Because I know that you can actually give us an in-depth. Of course, we will not go that deep into the topic, but if there's anything that we are missing out here about understanding about, how China is going to play a role in it and how things are going to be within some time. So if there's anything that you would like to share, I would, and everybody would like to know.
So we as we saw in 1989 and 90s, when the Warsaw Pact were dissolved. Warsaw Pact was the alliance which was giving a tough fight to NATO during the Cold War. So with this kind of circumstances in Ukraine and with the kind of influence America is doing in various other countries, we may see the rise of another anti-America coalition. China may be part of it, Russia may be part of it. Some other countries may join it. So, technically speaking, what I feel, what I perceive, and what I analyze is that America is actually giving rise to another big organization like Warsaw Pact against it, against NATO, or maybe it is going to cause another alternative of NATO from Asia to the world. So, which is going to be quite difficult to handle, but yes, it will start another race. But certainly, I feel that another world order is going to get ready with the Russia and China being part of it. I don't know to what extent India may be part of it, may not be part of it, but yes, the new world order is getting ready, and we may see the face of it in another 4 to 5 years.
Thank you so much, Major Amit Bansal, because I feel that, I've kept you like in between of all the conversation because you are the main part of it. And, we never really end with what we start and we never really start with what we end. But, that insight, that main component that you have provided us is really valuable. To end with, I would like to ask Dr. Raj Kumar Sharma before we move to vote of thanks. There is a question that I have for you, and I think you would be able to give an insight on it. How effective the role of information or cognitive warfare has played in this context, in this conflict that is taking place? Do you think Russia is on defensive when we talk about it or when we see it?
Okay. Information is always important because we are living in times of smartphones, so information is always important. And in the generation of warfares, information does play an important part. To your second part, which you said, that is Russia on defensive? Russia, I wouldn't say Russia is on defensive. We are so much surrounded by the Western perspectives that that Russian perspective somewhere doesn't come into the picture, right? But they are not on the defensive. See, the point is, for example, if you see what has happened in India, if you see the news channels, the government did not use the word invasion. Let me say that, right? Because I told you why we did not do that. But the news channels, they some of them have been having this issue that they have been giving this public opinion that Putin in some way is the Mugembo coming up in world order or something like that. But I think what I personally see is, because since I've been following Russia since my research days, yeah, there is a method in his madness, right? And his hand has been forced, right? There is a theory that is becoming more and more popular in Russian academic circles, which says that since America was finding it problematic to deal with both of them, Russia and China at once, so they thought to fix Russia first because Russia was the weaker in the two, right? And since there was already a mechanism in place, NATO was already there, right? NATO was losing its relevance. So they said that, okay, fine, let's target Putin, because if Putin retaliates, it is a trap. If he retaliates, he strengthens NATO and he brings all the European countries on one table and America's interest will be served. Right, so that was, they have played to a gallery. He has, of course, he has his own limitations. Russia, I won't say is on defensive, but yes, they have been overpowered by the perspective that is coming from the Western media. That I would accept.
Totally noted of that. And there is one, of course, we have surpassed the time, but I think this is again one important question that I would like to ask. And this question goes to Major Amit Bansal ji also, Swasti Rao, Dr. Swasti Rao also, and to you also. So I would like to start with Major Amit Bansal ji answering this. The question is the same for all three of you, but I just want a little bit one quick liners because this webinar has been very insightful. Is the world closer to the nuclear, chemical, or biological war than in the past? Major Amit Bansalji, you start first. Then I would move on to Dr. Rajkumar Sharma, and then we'll end with Dr. Swasti Rao.
So when it comes to the nuclear, biological, and chemical war, it is conditional, I would say. As of now, we are not on the verge of this kind of war, but unless NATO prods Russia to an extent that it is forced to launch nukes. If NATO remains out of this theater, there will be no nuclear, biological, chemical war. Biological war, of course, is out of question, but chemical war also, I don't think there's any kind of hazardous chemical any country is using, but predominantly nuclear war when we talk about. So I do not think, unless NATO gets actively involved and NATO starts hammering Russia, not the Russian forces in Ukraine, but it starts attacking inside Russia, then we may think, or maybe Putin may be forced to launch nukes. Otherwise, no.
I would like to move on to Dr. Rajkumar Sharma. What's your say in this?
Yeah, I think I will agree with Mr. Bansal, because I don't think there is existential threat to Putin as of now, right? Even if Americans are thinking of regime change, I don't think that is going to happen in Russia, because Putin, that nationalistic wave that came to Russia came along with Putin, right? And he was able to use Russia's energy resources for economic prosperity also, and also to have as to selectively whip up that sentiment of nationalism. So I don't think his position is at threat, and I don't think he would be thinking of using those weapons of mass destruction.
Okay, and now finally moving on to Dr. Swasti Rao. What's your say in the same?
I think the major part has already been highlighted by other two panelists. I'd just like to say that when we are talking about the weapons of mass destruction or the nuclear weapons, there are strategic nuclear weapons, and there are the tactical nuclear weapons, and the difference between the two is basically in terms of that the 5 kilowatt yield. Okay, so if that's like more than 5 kilowatt yield, and then they are called strategic nuclear weapons. Having said that, I think about this, of course, prodding by the West is one of the points only. Let's also remember that for Putin, the posturing bit is also very important. So if, like, for example, he has been bringing in his nuclear submarines and all that, there's been news of, him alerting his nuclear forces. So part of it is obviously optics and posturing, but we may not be surprised that he might use one of the tactical nuclear weapons, right, with limited, so to say, destruction. I mean, that is something that is a possibility that I would not like to rule out particularly. But yes, then to sort of stretch that argument and say that we are sitting on the brink of a third world war or a nuclear war is something which is too far-fetched, and it doesn't really work like that. So yeah, this is what is my take on it.
Thank you so much to all the three guests of today. And
Thank you.
Before I move on to Anisha for the vote of thanks, I would like to extend my thanks to all three of you, because this is like the best, conversation and this opinion building, perspective building that has happened specifically from Major Amit Bansal sides, and the Rajkumar, Dr. Rajkumar, and Dr. Swasti Rao. It has been so interesting, and it has enlightened us, because that's what we research and associates and interns are looking forward to. And I would really want other webinars where you all can three together can meet, because it's interesting, I must say. And now moving on to Alicia. Yes, thank you so much.
It is my esteemed privilege to deliver the official vote of thanks on behalf of Red Lantern Analytica. I, Anisha, propose the vote of thanks to the distinguished speakers who have enlightened our audience on this pressing issue at hand. It was a wonderful opportunity to hear from all of you. And we certainly look forward to similar opportunities in near future as well. And I will also thank the organizing team who have put together an effort to bring to us this particular webinar, and the participants who were equally responsible for the success of this session. With the kind permission of our distinguished speakers, I would like to close today's session, and we would disperse with the promise of rejoining again on another issue, another day, and that would be it from our side. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day ahead.
Thank you, Anisha.